So, thanks, Patrick.
Ina and Mona Lisa.
Okay, so if you're, I should change your, oh my goodness. So here's Tariq. We'll add him. All right, so the Zoom reminders are to make sure you've renamed yourself. Observer-home, would you mind adding your name? And make sure your affiliation and then your member, observer, or staff letter. We ask that members keep their cameras on, that everyone keep your mute on unless you are speaking. And if you can use the raise hand function, we'll be tracking that. We aren't allowed to use breakout rooms or the chat for substantive conversations. So you just make sure you're raising your hand when it's time for discussion. Anything, and let's just make sure we have a larger group tonight. Everybody is being constructive and respectful in your comments and your questions and listening openly. That will be great. And we're going to just roll right into the next topic, which is approving the past meeting minutes or notes. Are there first any corrections to last month's meeting notes? Okay. And with no corrections, that means that we have consensus support for approving the notes. And then we transition to the motion version of that. So co-chairs, if you could move to approve last month's meeting notes.
I move to approve last meeting's minutes.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Patrick is going to review the agenda and vacancies.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the first meeting of the 2023 calendar year of the Complete Streets Coordinating Council. It's been about 6 weeks, and I think a lot's been happening. So we're excited to pick this back up and build on our successful 2022. So welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. We've got a pretty full and exciting agenda tonight. I think there'll be a lot of opportunity for a really good discussion, detailed discussion. So we've got a lot of guest speakers, so we don't want to delay folks too much. Director Sam Credio will be joining us along with Felipe Ladrón de Guevara to discuss the Fifth Sixth Street project, where we are with all of that, updates, and kind of what the next moves in anticipation are for the city. Gabrielle Rascon will be here to talk more about the signal safety plan as part of the Proposition 411 program. We had a little sample of that previously talking about the first year, but Gabe will be able to give us the bigger picture and kind of the 10-year plan and really where we're seeing taking that funding and that money as part of the 411 program. Then we will have a discussion and kind of recognition of the press release that went out and was put together by one of our own esteemed members, celebrating the first year, the identification and completion of the first year safety plan of Prop 411. And then we will talk a little bit about our CSCC engagement with the RTA Next process, RTA more broadly, and then we'll go back to some of our standard CSCC hub check-ins about some of the other BCCs, as well as looking at some future agenda items and discussion of a potential retreat this spring, talking about kind of where we've been and where we're looking to take the committee. So again, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we're looking forward to getting started.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. So let's go right into the first topic, which is the Fifth Sixth Street Road Diet. Sam.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Sam Creedy. I'm the Director of Transportation and Mobility for the City of Tucson. And with me this evening is Felipe Ladrón de Guevara from Kittleson and Associates. And together, what we'd like to do is we have a pretty brief presentation that we'd like to run through and just really provide some context to the conversation as well as some results of a traffic analysis we conducted late last year. Felipe is the engineer that actually led the traffic analysis for us. So he's going to be doing most of the presenting. We're going to kind of tag team this a little bit. And then towards the end of the presentation, we'll certainly open it up for questions, comments, and that should pretty much do it. So Felipe, do you want to go ahead and share it? There we go. All right, so this evening we're going to be talking a little bit about 6th Street from Campbell to Country Club, and then 5th Street from Country Club to Wilmot. Go ahead to the next slide, Felipe. Some things we're going to touch on a little bit is just the project background, and then again, Felipe is going to run through some of the results of the analysis, including safety data, traffic operations, the actual proposed road diet, the analysis we conducted, and special event traffic, and then finally some of our findings and conclusions and recommendations. Go ahead to the next slide, Felipe. So starting out with project background. So one of the things I'd like to do is just kind of hit reset on where we're at relative to TIP 6. You know, when I stepped into this new role back in April of last year, I really needed to get a good understanding of where we're at and what was going on along this corridor. Because as many of you know, the 5th 6 road diet has been something that's been talked about. In fact, I think it dates back at least 3 or 4 directors now. So let me just give you an overview of where we're at and what we have going on out there. And then again, Felipe will get into the more technical stuff and then we'll circle back. So there are 2 projects that are currently on the books for this corridor. The first one is our Proposition 101, Tucson Delivers Better Streets. And with that program, that's really our pavement program, our 5-year program that we have that is going to replace the pavement on Country Club, or I'm sorry, on 5th Street from Country Club to Wilmot. And that program is primarily just pavement replacement. On this particular stretch of road, we actually have a new water line going in, which is really driving the schedule for this project. That water line project is actually expected to kick off later this year in the summer. And then once the water line's in place, then we'll come through with the new pavement, again, between Country Club and Wilmot. Then we also have a Proposition 407 project, which is our Tucson Delivers Strong Connections program, which is actually slated for pedestrian improvements between Campbell and Alvernon. And so, and again, that is all primarily outside of the pavement, outside the curb, really. It's pedestrian connections. I do believe there's a couple hot crossings included in that. But what you'll notice is there is that overlap in between the 2 projects. There is that piece of 5th Street between Country Club and Alvernon, in which we have both the Proposition 101 paving project as well as the Proposition 407 pedestrian improvements project. So, and I believe we're just getting ready to kick off outreach in terms of the Proposition 407 elements of that project. However, before doing so, we wanted to make sure we have some clarity on where we're headed with the road diet itself. So we'll be able to talk through a little bit of that later on in the presentation. The last thing I want to mention too, again, we'll probably circle back to this, is that through Proposition 411, there will likely be an opportunity to repave 6th Street between Country Club and Campbell. And that's going to be further out in the plan. Again, we'll circle back to that towards the end of the presentation, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Go ahead to the next slide, Felipe. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Felipe to take over the presentation. I may be jumping in every now and then just to add some commentary, but Felipe, take it away.
Well, thank you, Director Crevio. I'm excited to be here. It's my second time doing the presentation for this group. Last time was on First Avenue of the Bay Boulevards. And now I'm here to talk about the analysis that we did for the 6th and 5th road diet assessment. We collected a lot of data. The report is available on the website. So I just want to go with a quick recap on some of the highlights of the data that we evaluated. And I'm going to start with the crash data. We collected data for 5 years. Unfortunately, there were some pedestrians and bicycle crashes along the corridor, including one fatal pedestrian accident. However, something to highlight also I want to highlight on this data for the 5 years that we evaluated is that around 80% or more of the crashes occur at the signalized intersection of the corridors. And for me, this is important to note, as a potential road diet will significantly enhance or has the potential to significantly enhance the segments on the corridor. However, the footprint of the intersection may remain the same, and that's when the majority of the crashes, close to 80%, are occurring. We took a look at the pedestrian high-yield network, something that you are probably familiar with. And based on the data that was used back then to the pedestrian high-yield network, it's a little hard to see, but the 5th Street 6th corridor ranks relatively low compared to other collectors and arterials in the city. We also collect speed data along the corridor, and something that is noticed, is not a surprise, is that unfortunately drivers are just driving too fast on the corridor. The posted speed is 30 miles per hour, the average speed is 35, and the 85 percentile is 11 miles over the posted speed. This is the data we collected. We collected at several locations. Detailed analysis and more information is provided in the report. This is unfortunately perhaps a city trend and even nationwide trend, but it is something that we observe here on this corridor. With that, it's a quick summary. I want to turn into traffic operations. For that, we collected volumes, traffic volumes, vehicular volumes, pedestrian volumes, bicycle volumes at different locations within the corridor. And the chart that I'm showing here is about cars, it's about the vehicles, the traffic demand along the corridor during the time of day. As you can see on the chart, it's kind of cool for traffic engineers. It started with a demand very low, at night, in the morning, goes up, goes down. Then, in the afternoon, when people are getting out of work, picking up kids, going for shopping, groceries, the demand goes high. Something to highlight on this chart is that the red line, the red curve, represents the segment on the west end, close to Campbell. And this purple line over here curve represents the segment close to Wilmot. So you can see there is a difference in volumes between the west end of the corridor and the east end of the corridor. How the volumes start very high on the west and goes lower towards the east of the corridor, east end. So we took that information and we developed a simulation model to assess the operation of the corridor. However, due to the volumes, typically before the pandemic, they used to vary have relatively small variations, during months. However, nowadays, because of the pandemic, things are changing. Volumes vary more, vary more. And so for that, what we did an approach to evaluate kind of a sensitivity and use high volumes and low volumes to say like, hey, if everything continues, if everything goes back to normal or back to what it was before, the 100% of the community is working at the office and there are high volumes, these can be the conditions. If things continue the way they are with the current term, with providing that flexibility, we want to be in a scenario with lower volumes. What we evaluated something called high volume scenarios and low volume scenarios. Under the high volume scenarios, with the 4-lane, everything is working fine. And the only intersection that is, operating a level of service F is Campbell Avenue, but that's, for 1 or perhaps 2 hours a day. We the same with the low volume scenarios, with, kind of current conditions. And what we found is that everything in terms of the level of service operates even better, meaning that there's, a little extra capacity on the corridor, except in an intersection on Campbell Avenue that is, level of service D. Then what we did, now that we have an idea, of the evaluated, assess the existing conditions, we took a look at the proposed road diet. And we, use information that was available from previous studies. One that included the segment between Campbell and Country Club. And for that segment, the cross section included a two-way left-turn lane and one lane in each direction and bicycle lanes on each side of the road. However, something important to note is what I have highlighted here, that the cross width of the road, the existing cross width, is around 40 feet. Travel lanes, normally are 12 foot. When the travel lanes are 12 foot, cars are driving too fast. But, so we tend to go with something narrower, 10 or 11. By going with something 9, we're going into the other extreme. We can have problems due to the size of the width of the lanes, of the travel lanes, particularly on this road when Suntran provides service. For the other segment from Country Club to Wilmot, we also identify other cross sections, plans that were proposed by another consultant. It's the similar number of lanes, 2 lanes, 2 or left-turn lanes, bike lanes, but even over here on this segment, the width, the distance between from curb to curb is wider. So even over here, they have in some segments a buffer, painted, bike lanes are a small buffer between the bike lane and the travel lane, and that's because the width of the roadway can provide that, can accommodate that. So some of the things that we notice, on this corridor that can be a challenge or something that can be needs to be discussed while evaluating a road diet between the segment of Campbell to Country Club and Country Club to Wilmot, is that trash collection and postal services. When we have a trash pickup, trash collecting a truck collecting trash, or delivering post service, that can be a little challenge with a road diet. It's not impossible to solve because there are alleys behind that can work, that can provide access, but it's something that has to be taken into account when evaluated and implementing a road diet. Then I want to talk about the analysis that we did. So what would happen if we use the volumes that we collected in the field, the high volumes and the low volumes, to evaluate the configuration that we just saw? 2 lanes in each direction with a center lane. Well, if we evaluate the high volumes, as you may remember, Campbell Avenue was already failing, no difference. But now we start having some other intersections like Tucson Boulevard, Alvernon, Swan, that are getting close to capacity. Tucson Boulevard is just an F, it's failing. That otherwise is an E. But that's with the high volumes. With the low volumes, the scenario is a little different. Well, except in Campbell and Tucson Boulevard, there's still, have a level of service F, but the rest is operating at what we call acceptable level of service when the intersections has the capacity to accommodate those volumes. We also took a look at future volumes. What will happen in 2045? We just, pretty quickly, when we did this for the high volume scenario, and the report we have for both the high and the low. But then what happened, in the 2 lane? Well, we have more intersections that are going to be close, operating at level of service F or E if we have 2 lanes. Again, what this is, telling us that, the volumes vary. There are some times of day, time of the month, when the volumes are going to be low, and the corridor can operate with the 2 lanes. There will be some months or time of the day when the volumes are going to be high, and significant congestions can be experienced at some of the intersections. One thing to note is that, we got the volumes using the PAC travel demand model that anticipates a very small 0.5% per year increase in the volumes along this corridor. Another aspect that we took a look at was the travel time. What's going to happen with the travel time on the corridor? And in some conditions, travel time, is not going to change that much. Still operate at an acceptable level of service. but there is some locations, that segment that I want to bring to your attention, like Campbell to Country Club, when the existing travel time is around, this is 300 seconds, is around 6 minutes. But under the road diet, that will go to 1,000 seconds, which is around 17 minutes. So it will jump significantly in this segment. For another segment between Country Club and Alvernon, going from 161.9 seconds to 197, 30 seconds. If not, doesn't seem to be significant. But the one that we identified, that one was for that segment between Campbell and Country Club. And that has, that will be experienced by cars, by vehicles, but also by transit, because they're going to be sharing the same lane. And so we're anticipating just a high level estimate. Right now, the services provided, the travel time between on 6 between Campbell and Country Club is around 3 minutes. By reducing the number of lanes, it's going to be more congestion, and that can have an impact to a transit travel time to increase it up to 15 minutes. For the other locations, the other segments, in terms of travel time, increasing, minute or 2 minutes, doesn't seem to be significant, except for this segment of road. We also took a look at what happened to the side streets, because normally we take a look, at cross streets and intersections, but we wanted to see what will happen, the delay for the people either living on the corridor or coming to a minor street to a two-way stop control, trying to make a left into 6th and 5th. And what we identified is estimated that with a 2-lane, the delay will be significant, around 5 seconds. On 6th Street, on a 4-lane, it's very small. On 5th Street, if we go the road diet, there's an increase, 14 seconds to 45 seconds, but it's less, it's less than a minute. It's not significant, except at this location. We took the analysis further, and we used the Federal Highway road diet feasibility methodology to assess the feasibility of road diets, and that's based on traffic volumes, daily volumes, travel times, and intersection level of service. So we utilize the data that we previously discussed at high level because the time constraint for this meeting, and we plug into this analysis. And what we concluded is that the 6th Street between from Campbell to Country Club might, is not feasible, or doesn't meet the feasibility requirements for a road diet due to the volumes and the increase on travel time and level of service that will experience this corridor. However, the segment on 5th Street from Country Club to this different Country Club all the way to Wilmot, that one, based on the volumes, travel time, and level of service, comparing the existing conditions and the proposed road diet, it meets the criteria for the feasibility of the road diet based on the Federal Highway guidance that has been developed to evaluate this type of analysis. With that, when I go to the findings and conclusions, something that we identified is that in order, that to enhance or to provide, a road diet that can operate and be safe, there should be some additional improvements. It should not just be paving markings. At the beginning of the project, we were estimating that there's going to be new pavement on the road. We can just change the pavements. But based on the analysis that we conducted, the stress data, we realized that there's some improvements at the intersection that would be appropriate to implement, like adding left-turn arrows. Some of the intersections on this corridor don't have left-turn arrows, are just fully permissive movements. And so it's not safe, particularly for pedestrians, even bikes, have just cars finding for a gap without an arrow. Also, there needs to be some signal timing adjustments. Some of the intersections of the corridor are operating on the different cycle lengths. Some work with a short cycle length, some with a long cycle length. So it needs to be more consistency on that one. Same with left turn lanes and right turn lanes. We did a water analysis per City of Tucson guidance, and we provide recommendations on where to provide a left turn lane, where to provide a right turn lane. Similar, we want, one of the things that should be implemented with the road diet is to extend that storage for the queue lengths, so that cars, who wants that they want to make a left, they can make a left, but they don't block the through movement. If they have to wait longer, they can wait longer, but they have the appropriate storage to wait without interrupting the through movements. And another suggestion, that it could be that using technology in the future. Now the signals are getting smarter. There may be a way to optimize, traffic signals using something like active signal control or other technologies.
Hey, Felipe, before you switch slides, if I could just chime in here. So one of the things we also, I appreciate Felipe going over these mitigation measures. Now, our team has taken a look at it, and we've actually quantified what some of these mitigation measures might actually cost to implement. It's about a $250,000 investment at the intersection to actually fully implement some of these recommendations. And so that's once I get into my recommendations here, this is something that we're going to be looking at. Initially when we started going down the road of no pun intended of evaluating a road diet, it was really about restriping the roadway from a 4-lane cross section to a 3-lane cross section. And I think what has been helpful with Felipe's analysis is that there is some more work that needs to be done in order for that 3-lane cross section to be successful. Go ahead to the next slide, Felipe. So I think I'll take it from here, Felipe. Want to be able to share with everybody some of our recommendations that have come out of not only the traffic analysis, but input from the community, and as well as some of these programmed improvements that we have, on the slate here. So the first recommendation is on 6th Street from Campbell to Country Club. We're not recommending a road diet at this time with the current volumes. Again, the Prop 407 project does not have the funding to repave the segment of 6th Street west of Country Club. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the call here, there is some potential funding in the future for repaving of that segment. And so there might be an opportunity, which leads me to my next recommendation is on 5th Street, east of Country Club, all the way to Wilmot, is a road diet can be implemented. And what we have done, a little further analysis is that with some refinements, as well as some of those enhancements at the traffic signals that we just discussed, it does appear that the road diet could be successful. So what we've discussed internally is really going down the path of trying it out east of Country Club. And, I go as far as saying, piloting it. I'm not entirely sure what that looks like right now, but we are going to proceed with designing the segment of 5th Street that's going to be repaved with the 101 funding in a 3-lane configuration. But then again, also taking into account some of these areas that we identified relative to the traffic analysis. A few other things. Felipe, was there one more slide, or is this the last slide? I can't remember.
And that's the last one.
Okay. Yeah. So a few other things that I want to mention, and then we can certainly open it up to questions and comments. Last year we did and I think even the year prior, we did quite a bit of neighborhood outreach. I think Ryan Fagan, one of our team members, is on the call here. He's our 407 project manager, and he really did a great job reaching out to many of the neighborhoods along 6th Street corridor, trying to understand where the public was at in terms of this proposal. And what we heard is there was support in some places and obviously not support in others, but based on that feedback, it gave us a level of comfort that we could go down this path of further traffic analysis. And I'm glad that we did, because we learned some things along the way. I do want to give a shout out to Ward 6 and their staff. They were very gracious in helping us coordinate some of those neighborhood meetings and presenting at the neighborhoods. And by and large, Ward 6 has been a big supporter of the road diet. And my recommendation on the 5th Street east of Country Club is really in consultation with Ward 6 and what are some of the feedback they're hearing. The last thing I want to mention too is that if you really want to nerd out on all of the data that went into this presentation, we actually have a full traffic analysis on our website. I believe that Patrick shared that link out to you, and you can really dive into it. And I think it's like 80-something pages long. You can check out everything that we have on there. We also have survey results that we did along the corridor, as well as some other presentations and studies that were done. So this has been looked at in a lot of different ways. My initial reaction to the traffic analysis gave me pause for concern, especially when we look at those 2045 volumes. But I think as we've really dug into this a little bit more, it does seem like that segment east of Country Club is a good candidate and can be successful. And so Felipe and his team for doing the hard work on the analysis, and also shout out to our traffic engineering division, as well as our planning and programming division, for all the work that they've done. So and then I hopefully I mentioned this, but let me just reiterate that the schedule for the Prop 101 project is really being driven by the water line work that has to occur. I believe that design is wrapped up, and we are going to be going out for a construction manager at risk contractor to begin the water line work while we finalize the design for the segment from Country Club to Wilmot. And so the idea is that once the water work is complete, that same contractor will just roll right into the pavement reconstruction. And then later on this, I guess I could say spring, essentially, we'll be kicking off the public outreach on the Prop 407 pedestrian improvements, and Ryan will be leading that effort. And again, we'll be working with Ward 6 on reaching out to the community. And then I know later on in the agenda tonight, you're going to be talking a little bit about Prop 411. We do have coming on January 30th, an Independent Oversight and Accountability Commission meeting, the IOAC, which is really, your counterpart on the road portion of 411. We'll begin having the conversation about the future of the 411 neighborhood paving program, as well as the collector improvement program. And that segment of 6th Street, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, is included in a future year for 411 funding. So Felipe, maybe you can take down the presentation so I can see everybody's screens, and I would be happy to take any questions you have.
Okay, for questions, remember to raise your hand and we'll call on you, and we give preference to members. And then with extra time, we'll go to observers and staff. And Sophia, we also want to see if you have any updates from the BAC that you would also like to share, perhaps before we launch into all the questions.
I have a letter from the BAC, but I think it'll make more sense to jump into questions since we have Sam Credio with us now.
Okay. Questions or comments from members? Ruth.
A couple questions. Did you all look at, were there any bike counts done along the 5th, 6th Street corridor that you could look at to see what pedestrian and bike traffic there is?
Felipe, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I believe we collected some counts at some of the intersections for pedestrians and bicycles. Let me take a look, and I can provide that information to Patrick if we have that available.
Did part of PAG's bike count, do they count along those corridors?
No, just at the intersections.
Okay, because my one question is, I'm wondering if bikers are riding on the sidewalk where there are sidewalks? You don't know?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. That's possible.
Then another question, and I'll be done. My one concern is that you're going to dump people at Country Club, and Country Club's awful. There's no bike lanes. There's no sidewalks in places, and that's a big concern that people on their bikes are going to get stranded at the end of that with no place safely to go.
Yeah, I
That's
think
a
that's
question.
it's a good question. Thanks, Ruth. No, actually, it's a good question and a good comment that we can definitely take a look at as we are designing that segment. Is what does that transition look like from 5th to 6th at Country Club? You know, I don't know in the context of this analysis that we looked explicitly at that, but that is definitely something we can evaluate.
If you could somehow get them to 3rd Street safely,
Sure.
maybe have signs before Country Club to detour them before they get to Country Club. You can run them through Miramonte probably, or that's actually after Country Club. No, it isn't. It's before Country Club. So that would, yeah, you can shoot them through Miramonte would be an easy way to get to 3rd Street.
Okay, so we're gonna do Miranda, then Riley, then Sophia, then Evren, then Charles. Miranda.
Thanks, Ruth, for bringing up the Country Club thing, because I had the same concern. That intersection at Country Club and 5th/6th is really difficult to navigate on a bike or if you're walking. And then I had a similar way of thinking about, you know, sort of in the vein of the bike count. My first thought when I saw that, you know, the numbers were relatively low for bicycle and pedestrian injuries is that people aren't biking and walking along there because it's really unpleasant and there's no infrastructure. Like I bike everywhere and I would never use that way or try to bike on the sidewalk because the sidewalk's in really bad condition on a lot of that if there is sidewalk. It seemed like a lot of this analysis really focused on the reduction of lanes and the impact on the abilities of cars to continue traveling without getting slowed down. And I wonder if there's opportunity to rebalance our considerations and think more about level of service and sort of what we're doing to take care of other transportation modes. I think that's kind of like the interest of this council in this project is sort of the complete streets you know, perspective weighs all of these transportation modes in a sort of holistic way instead of prioritizing cars at the expense of everything else. So just like a few thoughts / questions about, you know, did you think about induced demand for adding infrastructure for bicycles and pedestrians and how that'll reduce the amount of cars on the road?
I'll let Felipe follow up after I make a few thoughts. So great points about that. You know, it definitely, you know, as we were looking at the 2045 volumes and I've been dissecting this a little bit more, it's a little bit of the chicken or egg. And so you make a great point about, yeah, of course, we're not going to have very many pedestrian and bicycle crashes and fatalities because people aren't using it. It's unpleasant and they're not there. So that's a really good point. In terms of, you know, how we might analyze other transportation modes, I'll probably put Felipe on the spot to help me with that. I was trying to think about what that might look like in the context of analysis, but I'm also thinking about how that might change the recommendation. You know, we are going to move forward with designing the segment east of Country Club to a 3-lane cross section with bike lanes. You know, I don't have currently a way of paving west of Country Club until those 411 funds become available. So I think this is, you know, about the best that we can do right now. And so I don't know that what initial analysis how that might change the recommendation east of Country Club. Felipe, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree with the comments. It's more a kind of a city policy or city guidelines in terms of how they want to prioritize safety and other modes for this type of projects. In terms of, we didn't evaluate latent demand for pedestrians or bike, but we did focus on cars, took a look at, you know, the extra capacity of parallel roadways. What would happen if that demand that is on 5th and 6th, they have to reroute or they want to reroute to like Broadway and Speedway. And we noticed that Broadway and Speedway has the capacity to accommodate that demand that might not be, that might have to reroute as part of this road diet.
Okay, thanks. Riley.
Hi, everybody. Thanks. I have a lot of thoughts and comments and questions, so maybe I'll chime in here, give some people some other time. But and thanks for the presentation. I mean, number one, I'm in that area all the time. My kids go to Sam Hughes Elementary School, so I take the bus on there, drive through there. I also bike on 3rd Street Bike Boulevard probably most of the time. But that, like, you know, it's like a very exciting thing for people who live and move around there, especially with kids, to have a road diet. Like right now, if you go in there, it's kind of chaos with people speeding, passing each other. You know, everybody's angry because there's no middle turn lane. Everybody gets stuck behind each other. And all I can think about is how stressful it is for people going through there, and to maintain that. I'm thinking specifically about Campbell, the country club, but some of that exists further down. But you know, I've talked to other families with their kids, and oh man, would that be amazing if that was a way to, like, you know, you could bike down that way, or you could feel comfortable crossing it with your kids. And I just don't know how, you know, this concern about delaying traffic, and, you know, I think Felipe talked about speeding being such a problem on there, how maintaining, you know, 4 lanes through there is a good thing for the city in any way at all. Like, I guess it saves people a little bit of time driving, but in the context of all of these other benefits that come with the road diet, and also a vision for the city as a livable, walkable, bikeable, safe place, it's really hard to swallow that sort of analysis coming very much about, like, is there going to be a delay for cars? I really think we have to think about this huge expansion to Broadway. We've got Speedway. We have this Downtown Links project. Like, how many more expansions do we need to be able to identify a corridor that can have a road diet and be a low stress corridor that passes the university, Mansfeld Middle School, Ross Scrooge? Well, that's a little further the other way, but maybe eventually down that way. Sorry, the other way. But, like, you know, Sam Hughes, the, like, what is it? The Tucson and 6th has got all those little restaurants and shopping areas. Wouldn't it be nice to, like, you know, be able to walk without fearing for your life, or cross with a bike and park there? You know, I'm just throwing out a lot, like, you know, there's specific questions obviously too, but I just really would like to see that, like, bigger vision for what Tucson is aiming for, and what I've heard about, to be balanced with this delay for cars, who I think, you know, we're making a lot of assumptions, and that's part of your job, I guess, is to assume how much traffic will be there. But I think we need to, one, learn to not use low stress corridors like the Bike Boulevard plan. That's really what that is about, to say, hey cars, this is not for you to drive through. And I think this is a corridor where you can say, hey, this is not a high speed corridor to cut through town. So anyway, those are more comments and thoughts. And I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to present, and I turn it over to some other people for questions and comments.
Thanks, Riley. Any comments back, Sam, or Felipe?
Nope. Thanks for your comments, Riley.
Okay, I
I'm ready
guess,
to go.
are you ready?
Yes,
Okay, good. Your hand was down and then I lost track of you.
I
Go
know, it's ready to go.
ahead. Go ahead, Sophia.
Yeah, I think Riley brought up a good question, you know, with the vision, because I think when we were excited to hear about the road diet, and then it was taken back, the question that was in my head was, when is the city engineering going to be proactive? Because we've made so much progress, I think, in terms of understanding what is serving all Tucsonans with our different modes of transportation. So Felipe and Sam, I'm thankful that you put together a report where we could take another look. We could know what those mitigations would need to be if we were to go through with a road diet in the certain areas. Because what we saw with the traffic study was that while there was an decrease in traffic, there was an increase in in crashes in 2022. So the fact that we're not taking it off the table, we're looking at we're taking a closer look to see what we can do. That's encouraging to hear. You know, the grade F that has been brought up, that was highlighted. And I just wanted to give some feedback that the grading system is not clear to the public. So I believe that however we're going to move forward with this, the grading system is not addressing certain things that we feel are important to pedestrian infrastructure. So we're going to have to take a closer look at that together. And then I was also curious too, this is more of like, it's a specific question. I was curious about how short we are in terms of funding to repave the road west of Country Club. And then I think as we go forward with community engagement, it's always a question, how are we weighting the voices that we hear? Of course, we're always going to have pro and against, and so how are we weighting those voices? But the question that I'd like to have answered is just understanding the funding gap.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia, for those comments. And you know, I'll make a few comments of my own, and then I definitely want to answer your question. So a few things to keep in mind is, you know, level of service is an industry standard in terms of traffic operations, but you're absolutely correct in that it does not take into account bicycle and pedestrian activity. And you know, I'm sure Felipe can provide a little bit more context there. But that is just something that we use to evaluate traffic signal operations. You know, one of the, and I probably should have mentioned this when Riley was providing his commentary, is that we don't want to 100% prioritize car travel through this corridor, because obviously there is a need and intent to provide better bicycle and connections all throughout this corridor. At the same time, you know, creating potential poor traffic operations at many of these north-south signalized intersections could also create an unsafe situation in which you have folks behaving in an unsafe manner. And so that is really why we had to conduct this level of analysis to make sure that we weren't doing that just at the sake of making sure we can get free lanes. And I think what we're doing is trying to go into this eyes wide open and making sure that we're making the best decisions we can for all users of the roadway and the best use of the taxpayers' dollars. Relative to the question west of Country Club, I apologize. I should have probably had that, and I don't have that number right off the top of my head, Sophia, on the cost to repave 6th Street west of Country Club. I mean, the number we used to use is about $1 million per mile to repave a roadway, but with today's prices and the way things are going, I don't know that that's a good number to use. We can certainly get back to you with some of that information. I'm sure that we have it. That segment was actually repaved, I think, in 2016, I want to say. And so what it's due for in the future is, I believe, a mill and overlay. So just removing 2 inches of pavement, putting 2 inches back, but that presents an opportunity to restripe it. I do think that in the future, a couple things like Felipe said, we need to take into consideration is the narrow cross section there. No matter what, if we try to get 3 lanes and 2 bike lanes through there, we have to contend with the narrow cross section. However, we have noticed there's actually quite a bit of space outside of the curb on that segment between Campbell and Country Club. And so maybe there is an opportunity to push those curbs out a couple feet in each direction. We definitely have to take a look at that, making sure that we're addressing transit travel, making sure that, you know, folks can get out of the neighborhood when they need to. You know, what we found is that the traffic volumes increase as the closer you move towards U of A. I definitely think that there's going to be some calibration of traffic once that segment east of Country Club is restriped to 3 lanes. And so that's why I think we're going to have a great opportunity to take a look at what happens post road diet and how we can you know, take advantage of some of those opportunities in the future. Felipe, did you want to add anything to that, or maybe correct something I said that was wrong?
No, I think, you know, you're right on. You know, as you say, you know, what we have realized, you know, working with the city is that road diets, in order to be successful, is more than just restriping. What we found on, you know, 6, that the road section is limited, and the city has only budget, you know, even in the future, to just do pavement treatment. But in order to have a successful road diet, the curve has to move, the concrete has to move. There is a space to do that, but there is additional, funding that needs to be allocated in order to fully accommodate the cross section in a way that is safe. And so those are the things that has to be, as evolving, as some indicated. The director Credio. The road diet is going to occur on 5th, traffic is going to reroute, and potentially the volumes on 6th are going to go down. With the volumes down, maybe going with a road diet becomes feasible in the future. That can be part of phase 2.
Okay, so we have all of this, CSCC members have asked questions. There doesn't seem to be any more hands up. We're at time, but Sam, we'd like to ask you, we have 4 observer hands raised. Should we take a few more minutes for those, or? This
Yeah,
is
thank you very much for that question. I've got about 10 minutes before I've got to jump. So sure, we can definitely take some of the questions and comments from the audience.
Okay, so let's try to be brief in your and concise in your comments, please. As well as, So we've got Everin, Charles, Logan, Ryan, and we're not going to do any more after that. So go ahead, Everin.
Okay, thanks so much. Hi, Sam and Felipe. Thanks for the presentation. It's helpful to break down the big report to a few slides. So I have 2 things. One is really, it's already been spoken to, so I'm not going to repeat all of that, but just to say that I also wholeheartedly agree with the vision of doing something different on this corridor, especially given where it is, sandwiched between Speedway and Broadway. So all those comments, especially things Riley brought up about maybe moving away from more vehicular focused analysis. And a couple of quick maybe ideas around that could be to look at pedestrian level of service, or even doing intercept surveys at that particular section between Campbell and Country Club as that conversation moves forward, and talking with people who do walk along and across 6th Street, because that really aligns a lot with what we've been hearing over the years from people. As an advocacy organization, we get a lot of emails and people contacts, and there's been numerous folks who talked about the difficulty of crossing and, basically their comfort levels and how safe they feel. So anyway, that's one bucket, and I won't go in there. Just like maybe I think further analysis there from a point of view of especially people walking would be really helpful to supplement the data that you gathered, which seems to be more focused on car travel. And the second thing is more of a question. I'm curious, this is a clarifying question. I may have misheard, but I think in the beginning you said a majority of the crashes were taking place at intersections, but then the road diet would not necessarily change the footprint. So it may not be the best way to address. I don't know if I missed something in there, but in my mind, road diet would change the footprint at the intersection, because eliminating a lane changes the intersection geometry. And like, if you look at FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, road diet conflict points graphics, they show conflict points going from like 8 points of conflict for a 4-lane cross section to 4. So the conflict points are being halved. So I'm just, I guess, confused about why a road diet would not improve intersection safety. If you could elaborate on that, that would be helpful. And I'm going to mute myself now. Thank you.
Sam,
Sorry, I just got a text from Sam. He said his laptop just died.
Oh, gosh. Well, Felipe, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, well, I can mention that, we did analysis based on plans, concepts that were already prepared for the corridor. So based on those concepts include the same number of lanes at the intersections. What it was used to be a through lane, now it's a right-on lane. So the crossing distance is the same. It may be that before there was 2 through lanes and now it's 1 through and 1 right, but the distance didn't change. So the pedestrian exposure is the same. And as I indicated before, some of those intersections doesn't have a left turn error. It's a permitted movement. And so it's, it's just complicated for pedestrians.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Charles, and I think Sam is back now.
Hello. I was wondering if there were any commute time data taken for cyclists and other modes of transportation besides cars and the consideration of the road diet. Like, how would the road diet affect the commute time of a bicycle upon the corridor?
I'll let Felipe jump back and answer, but I don't know that we looked at that. What I do know is there's not currently a bike lane on that segment. And so my guess is if cyclists are using 5th, 6th, it's in the travel lane. So I don't know that I can 100% answer that. So this would at least improve that situation. And Felipe, did we take a look at travel time for cyclists?
No, because of the lack of infrastructure, unfortunately. Yeah, we didn't take a look at that.
Okay.
And then my second part to that is if the road diet is not going to happen between Country Club and Campbell, are there any plans to at least slow down traffic?
No, that's a great question. And that was one of the things that jumped out at me immediately when we took a look at the data, are the speeds. I think the short answer is yes. I think the long answer is we're going to have to really do some work to figure out what's the best way to reduce speeds to that segment west of Country Club. And so I guess I don't have a great answer for you now, but it is something we're keenly aware of, especially through this traffic analysis we've done. And we're going to work to come up with a solution for that.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Next is Logan.
Hello, I just had one. Thank you for the presentation. Really great to be walked through that. I had one question and one, second question, but one of them is, was this survey done before the completion of Broadway's added lane expansion?
Yeah, very good question, Logan. And I apologize. I should have clarified that during my presentation. So we collected the traffic data after Broadway was complete. It was actually in August after school returned into session. What we do acknowledge is that the contractor was having rolling traffic control set up to do utility raising. And so while by and large the road was open 3 lanes in each direction on Broadway, there definitely could have been times where there was lane restrictions. And also some of the other feedback we've gotten as well, it hasn't been open for that long because that project went on for so long. It's likely that the people that were traveling on Broadway have probably moved over to 5th, 6th, to be quite honest with you, and Speedway. And so traffic really hasn't recalibrated to Broadway being open. So we definitely took a look at that, and we've even thought about maybe going out and taking some additional traffic counts to see if anything else has changed. But because of what Felipe shared with you from Wilmot to Country Club, we feel pretty confident that this could work based on what we've seen, even if those volumes on 5th Street are slightly elevated because people are still using it and not using Broadway.
Yeah, that was, and Felipe did hint at that earlier when he said the induced demand would move to Broadway or Speedway, because it's easier for a car to move to Broadway or Speedway than for a cyclist to move up to 3rd, 2 blocks versus 4 in a bike.
Sure.
And then my other question is, in the drawings of the roadway, Felipe, you showed like a 5-foot bikeway and then the travel lane. But I don't know how everybody feels on this, but wasn't the whole purpose of this to reduce the speed of cars and to make a safer corridor? And so like in some areas, wouldn't it be better to just have a shoulder and not a complete full 5-foot bike lane where the roadway is too narrow, just to narrow the roads, reduce the speeds, and make it an overall safer, better corridor for even the drivers? Because that road is really awful in a car or as a cyclist or as a pedestrian having to veer through the lanes. So
Yeah, so yeah, I realize it's both a question and a comment. So yeah, the cross section that Felipe showed was actually based on another study that was conducted, I think back in 2016. And really it was what would it look like to have 3 lanes and 2 bike lanes on that segment. And so you're right. There is an opportunity that maybe we don't put in bike lanes, but it's a shoulder that still allows us to neck down the cross section, and with the intention of having lower travel speeds through there. So again, that is something we can certainly take a look at. The segment east of Country Club, I think Felipe showed that was likely going to have a buffered bike lane because we have the width to get that through that section.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're going to jump over to a member, Tariq.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of what I was thinking actually was recently stated, but I just want to make sure, a few meetings ago, we discussed making sure that we, if we have the money, making sure that we see the projects all the way through. And if we feel like there might be any conflict, further on down the line or whatever, we make sure that we don't do any projects halfway. So I know that in terms of this conversation, I know we're talking about more between Campbell and Tucson Boulevard, but there was an individual who mentioned the question about bike and pedestrian traffic around that area and commutes to work. And I know that since I live quite just slightly east of Country Club on 5th and 6th, on 5th, and you won't really find many pedestrians or cyclists in that area because it's not really I would say friendly for that. And there's just a lot of issues with traffic. And one thing I wanted to add that I didn't necessarily hear in the presentation, I might have missed, is, a lot of these situations, accidents, et cetera, might happen at night. And I don't know if there was any conversation done about or had about lighting in these areas and seeing if there should be something done with even better lighting in some of these darker areas.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think the analysis took in streetlights. Felipe can correct me if I'm wrong. If that is the case, one of the good things about 411 is that it actually can fund streetlights. The 101 project cannot fund streetlights. I know that definitively. I don't know offhand if 407 can fund streetlights. It may, but I think maybe only at the Hawks is where it might fund streetlights. So Felipe, did we look at streetlights through this corridor as part of the analysis?
No, that's a very good point. And yeah, we did not look at that streetlights.
Okay, let's moving on. Sam, how many more minutes do you have?
Sorry, just real quick. I heard from Ryan Fagan, the project manager for the 407 project, and they do have funding available for the streetlights on the portion from Campbell to Alvernon. So
Okay, thanks.
that's under
And
design.
Ryan.
Yep.
Excellent. Sam, how many more minutes?
I got time for one more question.
Okay, it looks like it's Ryan.
Hey, thanks. Mine's mostly just a brief comment. I'm a Tucson resident. I've been here 25 years. I went to middle school and high school here in Tucson. I've lived along the 5th, 6th Street corridor. As long as I've been here, I went to high school at Rincon and used to bike down 5th Street to get to school every day, and then went to the U of A and bike down 5th, 6th to get to the U of A. Stopped using between Campbell and Country Club as a bike route over 10 years ago due to the narrow lanes, the increase in the size of modern vehicles. It just got to a very unsafe option for commuting through that corridor. So any sort of option to shift the sidewalk into a multi-use path or some other option to allow for safe bike travel through that corridor would be super helpful. But I'm very excited to hear that the cross section will go down to 3 lanes going further out east. it's a much needed improvement, and yeah, it's just going to be helpful for the neighbors and residents and students in the area to get some other options besides just car travel or unsafe bike travel taking the lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay. Patrick and Sam, do you want to just make a comment about anybody else who has, like Alexandra has a question, any others? And how do you want to handle those after this meeting? What would be the best way?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to, and I'll make a few closing remarks. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for having me and Felipe come and present our analysis and talk a little bit about this corridor. You know, we have a great opportunity with all of the funding sources we have to do something different. And I think that what we've heard from the community is that they'd like to see something different. And we're going to try to deliver the best we can for the community in this segment. You know, as you have additional comments, you can always reach out. Obviously, you have Patrick's contact information. Two other ways that you can contact the Department of Transportation and Mobility is you can contact us Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 by telephone at 520-791-3154. You can also send an email to t.concerns@tucsonaz.gov. And in fact, if you ever have any sort of service request, and I see Tani just dropped that into the chat, thank you. If you ever have a service request or something you see out in the right of way that needs to be addressed, please let us know so we can get out there and fix it right away. Lastly, I just want to mention in terms of, again, what the future engagement, public engagement looks like for these two corridors. We'll be moving hot and heavy on the design for 5th Street east of Country Club. I think that if we run into any scenarios where we need to run, you know, the design by you, in fact, I think that's even part of your charge as a Complete Streets Coordinating Council, we can certainly share that with this group. And then, as I mentioned before, Ryan Fagan will begin his outreach on the Prop 407 segments here pretty soon. And then lastly, our Prop 411 Independent Oversight and Accountability Commission will begin meeting next week on Monday, the 30th. And certainly you have an opportunity during the call to audience if you want to advocate for 6th Street west of Country Club being included in the collector improvement program. Just so you know, as of right now, staff's recommendation is to include that in the program, I believe in year 4 or 5. And again, I just want to thank you all so much for serving on this committee. I realize that it's a time commitment and it's one that I am very grateful that you're doing. So thank you again.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, all right, thank you all. A lot of interest in this topic, of course. All right, we're going to have to move on. So the next topic is Prop 411 traffic signal plan, and Gabe is going to give us a short presentation, and then we'll have a brief Q&A comments.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen here. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabriel Rascon, and I am the Smart Mobility Program Manager for the Department of Transportation and Mobility. As of late, I've been leading the efforts for the signal upgrades component of Proposition 411, and I thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. As many of you are aware, Tucson has some of the most highly traveled roadways in southern Arizona, and according to the Federal Highway Administration, of 494 urban areas studied in the US, Tucson ranks in the top 34% for vehicle miles traveled on major arterial roadways, such as Grant and Speedway. Currently, the city of Tucson maintains and operates about 450 signalized intersections on the network. With this said, our signal systems have not realized the benefits of any significant funding of this type in decades and is in need of infrastructure and technology upgrades. While controllers, the brains of the intersection, are of the latest version, receiving an upgrade in recent years, other elements of the signalized intersection are dated, with equipment going back to the 80s and 90s, and in many cases in a deteriorated state. This makes our intersections vulnerable, difficult to maintain and repair, even susceptible to inclement weather conditions, and many times leads to an intersection in flash, known as a safety default mode when there is a short present in the circuit. All of this creates limitations when it comes to improvement and often prevents the installation or deployment of any modern hardware and software, which allows for more safe and efficient traffic signal operations that provide improved bicyclist, pedestrian, and vehicle sensing technologies, which in turn helps support an orderly flow of traffic with decreased congestion and delay, also reducing idle time and vehicle emissions that result in cleaner air. Updating outdated equipment and hardware will also permit diagnostics and repair more readily, even allowing remote repair and minimizing downtime. The Proposition 411 signal improvements component includes $30 million over 10 years for traffic signal technology upgrades. This funding is intended to upgrade Tucson's traffic signal system along major roadways and other areas to support safe and efficient travel across Tucson. Although we cannot address the entire city, we now have the opportunity to augment areas where it's needed most. Years 1 through 5 emphasis will be on infrastructure, or what I like to refer to as foundational improvements. Unless we take these initial steps, new technologies cannot be attained without upgrading or replacing existing conditions that are substandard and unable to accommodate or support new or additional equipment. In doing so, this will create a baseline where we can achieve maximum safety and put ourselves in position to explore the technological options in years 6 through 10. That can further improve transportation and accessibility, and also help us make data-driven decisions for emergency planning, traffic congestion, and general public safety. However, because this is a rapidly growing field, analysis and technological considerations for years 6 through 10 will not begin until around year 4 or 5. Areas selected for improvement to meet current standards are 9 corridors within the city of Tucson, originally projects from the Move Tucson and recognized as significant for crosstown travel. Also included are arbitrary intersections derived from intersection study lists that have been prioritized and subjected to engineering analysis based on traffic safety data, high traffic volume, crash statistics, and also complaint driven. And lastly, emergency fire and flood flashers at remote locations that have been neglected due to funding priority, but now appropriate for upgrades. The projected 10-year plan is as follows. Year 1 to include Valencia Road corridor from Midvale Park to Houghton. We would be omitting I-19 to Alvernon and also Kolb to Houghton, as these are areas scheduled for roadway improvement through RTA and CIP projects. Year 1 would also include 30 intersections from the study list and all emergency fire and flood flashers in town. Year 2 would include 2 corridors, Kolb Road, Tanque Verde to I-10, Ajo Way, 12th to Country Club, and all remaining locations from the intersection study list. Years 3 through 5 will focus on the remaining 6 corridors, Golf Links, Alvernon to Houghton, Houghton Road, Tanque Verde to I-10, Grant Road, I-10 to Tanque Verde, 22nd Street, I-10 to Houghton, Alvernon Way, River to Palo Verde, and Speedway Boulevard, I-10 to Houghton. And as previously mentioned, years 6 through 10 improvements will be aimed at technological enhancements. This concludes my presentation on the Proposition 411 signal improvement plans.
Thank you, Gabe. Okay, time for some questions, comments. Or Patrick, if you have anything to comment on.
Yeah, just said thank you. The first year of this has already been received some funding through Prop 411, so that's what we're moving towards, and it's really executing on a kind of a core component of the Move Tucson process, which was identifying those 9 corridors, which had been identified really critical for that crosstown movement in the community. So it's a way to make a big impact on the community through 411 for not a lot of money in advance Move Tucson. So it's really exciting.
Thanks, Patrick. Ruth?
A couple things. Grant Road, the signals weren't redone with the RTA reconstruction?
There are segments along some of the corridors that were addressed, and Grant Road, you might be thinking of like the most recently Euclid area where there's indirect left turns. Also, I believe phases 3, 4, 5, and 6 are going to have indirect left turns. Those areas have been omitted from the corridor. So really there was a cost savings there, and then we can take it and apply it to other areas.
Then my second question, you said there's $30 million total over the 10 years of Prop 411.
That is correct.
What's the need? If you had a wish, well, how much money would you want?
Well, projected or tentatively speaking, the $30 million is going to allow us to address about 250 signalized intersections. With 450 out there total, we're gonna be in a pretty good position. I mean, if we were working with 50 million, we might be on par and be able to get every single one.
So the 30 million isn't that far below what the need is.
Correct.
Okay, good. Thanks.
For these basic type of improvements.
Basic type improvements, not fancy schmancy detection systems and movement and all that. None of that new technology will not be there.
There would be room for a little bit, and I'm sorry. So of the 30 million, I am allotting an amount for years 6 through 10 for the fancy stuff. So actually, yes, that 50 million would address the fancy stuff. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Ruth. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Nice, concise, clear presentation. Okay, so let's move on to the CSCC press release. Patrick, you want to kick us off for that?
Yeah, Miranda asked us to put this on the agenda just to kind of recognize and thank Rhonda for her great work. I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to see that, but we've posted it on the 411 information page, and it's basically just announcing that the Complete Streets Coordinating Council has approved funding to move the $15 million forward for the year 1 of the program. So I think we're still working with some of our communications team to set up the platforms to actually, share the projects and kind of the Tucson Delivers model of where we'll be funding some of these projects. But in the short term, announcing that work has been completed. I think we can fill that out more as we start to get to the 5-year plan. So where we are right now is that we were able to post that on our website, but kind of talking internally, it makes more sense if the coordinating council would like to also distribute that, to some media sources as a press release to get some more information out there. It's been approved through the body. I think that's something for discussion of the body. Miranda, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered all of it, Patrick. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure everybody saw it because there's a lot of emails out there, and it's such a topic of high interest for our community members that, it seems really important to be able to say, this is what's happening with Prop 411 and to be able to be specific. I think that's going to build trust and make people more likely to support future efforts. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew about the press release and that we acknowledged Rhonda's hard work on that, because it kind of came through and it was like, wow, this is amazing. And then thinking about if there's any way to kind of further highlight it, just so that people know that there is work being done on these critical issues.
Any questions or comments on the press release? Ruth, is your hand up from previously?
No, I have a comment on this.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to thank Rhonda. It was great. And I'm all for sending it out wherever we can do it, ward newsletters, the Star, however that works. But I also want to congratulate Miranda. She's been very good at doing call to the audience at the RTA board meetings relative to our position on First Avenue, North First Avenue. And I want to thank her for doing that. That's very time consuming, and she's been great. So we're getting our voices out there on that project as well. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Let's move on to RTA next. Paki, are you there?
So I think this was one that we wanted to, Miranda wanted to take the floor on this one.
Miranda?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for saying that, Ruth. That's really nice. So I was really interested in bringing up this topic of RTA Next again to this group to just kind of, I'm sorry, I'll be right back. My water's boiling.
In the meantime, Gracie,
sorry.
I'll get the press release dropped, and also I've shared the 5th, 6th walkability website, which is distinct but overlaps with the kind of the road diet portion that we were just talking about, for your information.
Awesome. I wanted to bring up, I briefly brought up the topic of like how this group might be engaged with RTA discussions around RTA Next, but it was right before the holiday break and after a pretty heavy meeting. And so I just wanted to bring it up again and see if there's any interest in brainstorming concrete ways to advocate for Tucson's position. It's just really striking when I'm tuning into these conversations, comparing and contrasting my experience in this group with the experience of my wife on the CAC, where, you know, these topics that are of really high interest, like, you know, the communities that are being served by these projects and whether equity and climate change are being taken into account, that there seems like there could be some opportunity for us to join with Tucson and present kind of a unified front in terms of maybe saying, you know, something to the effect of, we think that RTA Next should have or include these considerations or these sort of features or factor in certain things when identifying projects to fund. Something to kind of like help bolster the advocacy that, you know, that Mayor Romero does in the RTA meetings on behalf of our community. So I think it could be something like, one idea would be a collective letter from this body to mayor and council, laying out some priorities that, you know, that we are working on as a council. And those priorities are only going to get expressed to a certain extent if, like, just above us, you know, the body that's, you know, sort of determining projects on the regional level is not prioritizing that stuff, if that makes sense. It's been kind of a long day. But just like thinking about ways to sort of coalition build around these topics. So yeah, so I just wanted to bring it up again and see if there's any interest or any ideas or questions about that.
Ideas, questions?
I mean, like, for example, like when it comes to like talking about equity with projects, in our subcommittee meetings, when we've looked at projects and talked about which ones are going to be included in year one, what features, you know, lighting, sidewalks, whatever, equity is a very strong part of that conversation. And the way that we look at that is by overlaying projects with like equity maps, and that could be the neighborhood vulnerability index or areas where we know folks are lower income and less connected to resources. So that's like an example of something that we do at our level, but isn't necessarily being expressed at the regional level. And I just wonder if there's a role that this group could serve in that process.
Hockey.
Hi, thanks for sharing that, Miranda. One of the things I wanted to remind this group is last year, the CAC approved their guiding principles. And because of public feedback and call to the audience, they were able to make some revisions to the guiding principles, and which includes acknowledgement of equity and diversity and environmental issues and all of those things that are important to the community. So I thought that was a really good start, and the CAC was happy with it. And as they're moving forward with refining the list now, those are the things that they're considering as they're really honing in on each individual project. So I just wanted to mention that it's not anything that's that's absent from this, and it is definitely being looked at by the CAC.
Other comments? Rhonda mentioned that she supports a letter. Others?
I'm going to throw out my personal opinion on this. Is at this stage in the development, they don't seem to have a very open door for community engagement. So my suggestion is we wait until the plan's developed and then we engage as in the community outreach side of this as a committee maybe, and develop some positions on what's presented in the plan. And that's my personal take on this at this point. And I do want to say one thing. I found it very interesting. I went to the Plan Tucson gathering at the convention center, and the approach of Plan Tucson is so directly opposite of RTA Next. It couldn't be more interesting in that they start with public engagement and then develop a plan versus the RTA Next starts with committees developing a plan and then presenting it to the community for feedback. So it's just a different process. So I'm kind of thinking we might wait.
Rhonda?
I just had a clarifying question for Ruth. Ruth, do you think that there's any value in laying out just at least a preliminary introduction to our discussions with this group? And then, as things are refined through the process, continue that advocacy? Do you think there's any role for like this early, like encouraging of that they follow these particular principles that we are so strongly in support of?
There we go. I don't know. I think our advocacy should be through our mayor and council, and rely on our mayor to represent us. That's my take on it. Having watched some of these CAC meetings, the public comment, the call to the audience is never read. People don't give call to the audience comments. They're put in the record for you to find on your own on the website. So no, I would tend to think we'd work through our mayor and council.
Miranda?
I agree with that, Ruth. I have two thoughts. One is I wonder if folks would be interested in forming a subcommittee to talk about this further. I think timing is really important too, and it makes sense to wait until there is a plan and talking about it that way. The other thing is I keep thinking that there's like a gap between, like the meetings are at really inconvenient times. It's not very accessible. It's hard to like find where to even go. And if there was more of a conduit to the public so that there was more sort of public engagement, and I don't really have a clear idea to what extent like the CSCC is able to like be public facing and like do something like advocate a position and call on folks to call into meetings or things like that. But that's one thought. But I guess mainly, is anybody interested in joining a subcommittee to talk about this further and maybe strategize?
Ruth has raised her hand. Riley?
Yeah, I don't have any ideas around this, but I sympathize with what you're talking about and would be supportive of exploring options. Sure.
So that means yes, you'd join a subcommittee?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and I mean, I'm in support of continuing the conversation, and if there's a subcommittee, doing my best to participate or be a part of that to see if anything comes of it.
Yeah, and again, a subcommittee doesn't have to even meet more than one time, but it buys you more time to dig deeper into this conversation. Anyone else interested in joining a subcommittee on this topic? So we have oh wait, did someone, no, we have 3 people so far, Miranda, Riley, and Ruth, which is, I think, the minimum needed to form a subcommittee, and we would have to have the CSC. Oh, Rhonda will join, okay, 4, and Jill. All right, we're getting rolling here. So we have to have the CSCC officially create the subcommittee by consensus. So Miranda is proposing to create it. You know you have people that would join it. Of course, that's essential. So is there anybody who would not support the CSCC forming this subcommittee? And maybe you can, Miranda, would you mind restating what the subcommittee is?
This would be a subcommittee to further explore the role of the CSCC in advocating for Tucson in RTA Next. So I guess it'd just be an RTA Next subcommittee.
Okay, very good. Okay, anybody not support creating a subcommittee, a CSC subcommittee for this purpose? Okay, so we can assume we have consensus support for that. So now we need our co-chairs to move and second the creation of this subcommittee.
I move to form an RTA Next subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, done, created. Okay, anything else on this topic? You just bought yourself some more time to work on it.
I just wrote that Kylie had a comment in the chat box regarding the attendance of Tom McGovern. He has attended and presented to this body in the past and is on the distribution list. But thank you for bringing that up. Also, just a reminder that non-CSCC members are allowed to participate and be full members of the subcommittees. If anybody is so interested, let us know. We can add you to the distribution list. Doesn't count towards quorum, but can be a full participating member.
Thanks for reminding everybody about that. Okay. So let's move on to the CSCC hub. And these are 2-minute updates from these other relevant commissions, boards and commissions. So we'll start with Park Tucson. Jill.
Hi, we just met yesterday, kind of the usual, going over financials, and then 2 things of interest that hopefully will be available soon are the results of the curb management study. And then Park Tucson's been doing like occupancy counts for on-street parking to kind of determine when parking spaces are being used, and that should be available hopefully next month as well. I mean, that Donovan presented a little bit on that yesterday, and it's kind of what you would expect, around, in the entertainment district, Friday, Saturday night, pretty full, things like that, college. And that's it.
Thanks, Jill. Any questions for Jill? Okay, next is Pedestrian Advisory Committee, Tariq.
No report at this time.
Okay, Transit Task Force, Riley.
Nothing important I can think of to share. I mean, we've continued to spend a lot of time with fare-free transit, getting updates. We next month we have a field trip, and we're going to look at the North Bay Sewer Corridor. We're going to, instead of being in the office, we're going to see the transit centers, safety improvements that are going on in those places. And I think we are soon going to have a comprehensive operational analysis or something like that. So there might be some more interesting things coming down the pipeline, as well as, with fare-free transit. And I think that the city is supposed to come back by March with some more concrete data about how fare-free transit might look moving forward and what potential partners are and how to fill the gaps if necessary, if not filled from the general fund. So I guess that's something to say if you haven't been following the fare-free transit issue in Tucson. We are one of the, I bet most people here do know, but one of the cities in the United States and the world that has been looking at possibly making transit fare free permanently. So if you're not familiar, I do encourage everybody to look into that more or contact your ward office and find out their position on it. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
Riley, can I ask you a question? This is
Yeah.
Ruth. The comprehensive operation analysis, do you know when that is going to be completed and presented?
You know, I don't know, and they might do, and I think they said it could be ready as soon as March or April, but I don't know. And maybe they might do an update on where it is at this point. You know, I'd have to look back and see, but it's on our sort of upcoming agenda, hopeful list. So.
Okay, next up is Bicycle Advisory Committee, Sophia.
All right, so for the 5th and 6th Street agenda item, we also met for that. What we identified, a couple of points were that there were no performance measures for collisions when in the grading report. We were looking at the what wasn't brought up around the difference between hit at 30 miles per hour versus 40 miles per hour. So these are just a couple of things that we discussed that we're going to be compiling in a fact sheet. Today was really helpful to understand where Felipe and Sam are coming from. So we'll have points that are a little more tailored when we put together the fact sheet. It's really exciting. Mike Hendricks is on our team. He's actually a I have to look at my notes for professional traffic operations engineer in Seattle. So is bringing some technical expertise when we're putting together this fact sheet. It was really good to hear just like where it's at. And then we got an update. We're supposed to regularly get updates from law enforcement. And so that is a place where we have conversations around, you know, how these events are described, how these fatalities are even described. So we're hopeful that we can have more generative conversation there. I let them know that about the SSIP and how I think there was a unanimous agreement that we want to be giving input on those, specifically the bikeways, in terms of where the funding is allocated. So I'm a part of the SSIP subcommittee, and that's probably where I'll be contributing just whatever our insights are there. We will have an inaugural bike ride. So this is just open for bicycle advisory committees to get to know each other, friends and family. That's going to be happening February 12th at 10 a.m. at the Rito Park racetrack. And yeah, are there any questions on the BAC's involvement with the SSIP or 5th Street preparation on the fact sheet?
Questions? Okay, thank you, Sophia. Commission on Disability Issues, we don't have a representative still. Any update on that, Patrick?
Nothing at that time. We can give an update on all of our vacancies at the end.
Okay, so we're rolling into wrap up next steps and future agenda items. So the first item is proposed CSCC retreat, in-person retreat. Miranda, if you'd like to mention that, and then I have the Zoom poll ready to launch on the dates.
Yeah, so we thought that since there was a relatively recent influx of newer members, that it could be a good opportunity to come together and you know, sort of have a combination of kind of just hanging out and getting to know each other and community building, but also you know, really digging into the role that, you know, that this group plays in transportation planning and things like that. So we narrowed down like a list of prospective dates. We're thinking it would be like a half day. So nothing like too, too heavy, and then including food, so that there's some social time.
So here's the poll. Just ignore the fact that it looks like the title is the January meeting. That's just when you're taking the poll. Answer all of the times that could likely work for you. And this, just, sorry, I should have clarified earlier. This is really for key staff and all members, not observers, to weigh in on the dates, that is, so.
Does a retreat have to be open to the public?
Yes.
So how does that work?
We'll notice it. And I have to have the date ahead of time and make it open and available to the public. Anytime a quorum of the committee meets, we have to notice it publicly, and it is a publicly observable meeting.
Okay.
But we are picking the dates based on mostly on member availability. Anyone need more time? Members, key staff, people who really need to be part of the date selection.
Yes.
Okay, we'll just leave that open for a minute. Miranda, anything else you want to talk about regarding the retreat? Or any other thoughts or questions about the retreat?
I think something that might be interested in talking about during the retreat is like maybe considering how these meetings are structured or how they're carried out. So I think I would definitely be interested in that.
Yeah, we see it like that totally makes sense. We see this as an opportunity to get outside of like the sort of like traditional meeting like structure where we have an agenda and we're just discussing topics, to sort of like think about the bigger picture and things like that, and how we're doing the work that we're doing, and if there's there's opportunities to make changes.
Yeah, for sure. That's good. Okay. Anyone else need more time? So it looks like April 15th might be the best, in the morning or afternoon. Second choice, March 18th afternoon. So we've got this in the notes, and we'll check with anybody else who seems to be missing that needs to weigh in on this. And then Patrick will get back with you all with a save the date. Okay. Did I share the results, or did I just ended poll? I didn't share. There you go. Now you can see the results. Okay, so ideas, future agenda item, future agenda item ideas for the CSCC monthly meetings. Any thoughts about that? And including 5th, 6th Street, is that something that you want to take up again as the CSCC?
I was going to actually ask if it's possible to sort of like get regular updates so it doesn't fall off the radar, so that we're seeing it through. I think Tariq mentioned sort of like we have a commitment to see projects through, and that resonated with me. And then the other thing I forgot to say about the retreat is that this is going to be designed to not feel like a long meeting. So it's not going to, we promise it's not going to feel like work, like. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you for that. Sophia?
This seems a little nebulous, but something that I'm wondering is if in the future we want to come up with some sort of statement around what we expect with community engagement. It feels like something that keeps coming up, the quality of community engagement. So then maybe we start with a statement that evolves. Not sure.
Oh, what date is Cyclovia? 2023? That's in the spring?
We changed it to April 16th. So it was in March, but we changed it to April 16th.
Okay. Okay, other thoughts about topics?
Can we get a First Avenue update next meeting? Patrick? I would assume Patrick would do it.
Yeah, I can do that. Sorry, I nodded. I should have talked.
Jill, are you raising your hand? Yeah.
I am. I was asked by one of the members on Park Tucson if there was any new information about Grant Road I-10 situation. So if there is, could we get a brief update on that, please?
Yep, we can get an update on that as well.
Thank you.
Other ideas?
So I have a quick, Patrick, maybe you can talk. So the approved, 2023 plan that is moving forward. I don't know, maybe just updates that might be really quick on like which ones are getting started or how that's all going. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And maybe a field trip at some point to like maybe down the road ways to check out some of these as they get implemented or when they're done.
Something else I'm just entered my head since we've talked about it with the Fifth and Sixth Street situation is speeding. Is there some presentation that maybe we can get from TPD or your department, Patrick, on efforts being made to either enforce the speed limit, monitor, whatever it is, speed cameras, whatever people you all are looking at, because I mean it's bad.
I support that, Ruth. I'd be very interested in that discussion.
Yeah, we'll find somebody. Would you have a preference of TPD or?
Well, it seems to be a TBD issue that they don't have enough people to enforce the speed limits. And I used to see motor cops out, and you don't see motor cops out anymore, and nobody likes them, but they seem to work. So if you don't enforce the laws, nobody's going to abide by the laws. So maybe TPD.
Along with that, I don't know who would speak about speed cameras past and future, because I know they once existed in some places and have there was some vote about it. I don't know much of the background. I could probably research much, but like anybody.
Red light cameras.
Yeah, like red light running and speeding through intersections.
Yeah, we can look into that. Great suggestion.
Liz?
Patrick, do you know anything about like the project that's going to happen on Irvington? I mean, I've heard only a little bit about it, and it's going to be closed down for a couple years. And I don't know, like, what is the city's or some of it's ADOT? I have no idea, but maybe later down the road when you're all ready to present on that, that'd be good information to have.
Great. Yeah, we'll add that one. We were thinking about maybe just having a standing kind of projects updates items on these meetings. I don't know if that's something that the committee would find valuable, but we could look at kind of the big corridor projects and other things, the progress that we're making, and just kind of build that in monthly so you can all stay up to speed on everything that's happening in transportation.
I vote for that. That would be great. Love to hear about downtown links too.
Okay, you're coming up with a pretty good list. Which is great. And then the agenda committee and us, we meet and we review the list and we, put the most relevant things in the next agendas and stuff. So this is all really helpful. Yeah, and I put a chat to just if you it would be interesting to know how many of you the Plan Tucson general plan update process kicked off last week with a big open house. All right, did any of you not hear about that? Do any of you feel like you're not actually in the loop on that yet? Because we're helping with the facilitation, so it's really helpful to know who's hearing and not hearing. And then it will be relevant for the CSCC, and we'll have future discussions about that. Sophia, I saw your hand. Okay. Well, it is 7:24. We might be able to finish 5 minutes early. Is there any final comments? Any other wrap up?
Yes, I got a couple quick things. I'll try
Okay.
to take about 5 minutes. One, we've got a new Move Tucson website. So we've migrated over from the plan process website to just a standing kind of living document depository overview of the process, findings, outcomes. If you want to find the project list, kind of the recommendations of the plan, it's all in that link that I just dropped into the chat box. So that should be a quick, kind of easy reference point if you ever want to find that project list again. Funny thing is, you always have to type in the www. I don't know why, but if you don't type in the www, it redirects. We've had a little trouble carrying it over. So just follow the link as it is there. It'll work for you. That's the new project website. Other thing, I was going to mention Plan Tucson, third final. We have a couple vacancies. Catlow has stepped down, unfortunately, so we have another vacancy in the department DTM spot on the committee. So if you know anybody, we have the application form on the Complete Streets Tucson website. Anybody can apply, and we can try to get them through to the appropriate appointing body. So Cody is still down, Commission on Disability Issues. The city manager's office still has a vacancy. We've sent them a couple applications. Our office, and then Ward 5, we have a vacancy. And so those are the four, if you know anybody who would be interested. And finally, I would let you know we are in final contract negotiations, and we should be getting moving on Bilby very soon. So that will be our first Prop 411 project. Hopefully we'll see some public activity around that in the spring.
There's a question from Rhonda. Can we see the city's climate plan? Isn't it in they're collecting final comments right now? Is that correct?
That's the last I've seen from it. I don't know if what has been published since then.
The city has a climate hub website, maybe. Oh, there it is. Thanks. Oh, and Everett's working on that. So thanks for being here, Everett. Okay, Scott?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I heard that someone had made a comment.
Oh, actually, no.
Let's see.
Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I remember someone made a comment during the meeting about if red light cameras were allowed in the city. And I remember, and I think it was 2015 or 2016, City of Tucson voters passed, I think it was like 65 or 70% to ban red light cameras. And so that's been in place since then. But that's all I have to add.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thank you. All right. I think we now have achieved our full mission for this meeting. Covered all the topics. Hope you all have a nice month. There's various wrap up, our next steps people will be in touch about, and enjoy February. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody. Great meeting.
All right, I think it's good. I know Colleen had to step away. I'm going to